Alan Wake 2 is a little bit stinky and disappointing in my opinion, and don't get me wrong, it does a couple of things really well. For example, the story is a killer psychological thriller, however the gameplay is, in my opinion, a step back from the original, as the first game was, according to the backstreets of Wikipedia, an action-adventure game, as where AW2 has flipped the script with a new niche or genre going survival horror, so you've got all the debacles of the Resident Evil and Silent Hill series, plus all the setbacks, cons, or shortcomings of the original Alan Wake, 30% louder than the actual in-game sound, scaring a small amount of piss out of me. And then you get a notification that your buddy Randy Dandy just signed online and is inviting you to a party chat, scares the hell out of you. In a game where the gameplay loop is actually more frustrating than enjoyable, you're fighting with the camera more than other third-person shooters, ammo's freakishly scarce, you have these disorienting overlay jump scares that provide nothing for the experience, and you'll most likely be getting lost, stuck, or confused quite frequently as the game doesn't hold your hand, and even if you're not a Nimrod like me, you'll probably find yourself looking up several parts online. And even when you do get to those major set pieces that blow your socks back, it ends just as quickly as it came, and you're back to the monotonous running through forests with the camera clipping into trees as enemies jump out of nowhere, literally spawning right next to you. Still as spongy as the original. The weapons feel super weak, or the enemies feel super spongy or tanky. It's one of the two. There's definitely an imbalancing issue where even a shotgun up close or a hunting rifle headshot is not a one tap. It ain't even a two tap. I've dumped an entire tube of shotgun shells into my opponent, my foe, and he's still standing there, you know, giggling at me like I just hit him with a pellet gun. Inappropriate, and I'm sure that'll be changed in Alan Wake 2.
The lie detector test determined that was a lie.
And the biggest con, shortcoming, or limitation here is that the first game had snappy gameplay like this. As where AW2 takes the survival horror route, which makes combat feel more like this. More sluggish and less exciting in my personal opinion. Not really what I expected from a 13-year jump from Remedy Games, but speaking of jumping, there's plenty of jump scares to scare the piss out of you. But they're an overlay, kind of like what we saw with Halo 5 when Cortana's all messed up in Master Chief's head. We'll get to that later, but those jump scares added nothing. I got a pocket full of notes on my phone of some things I like about this game and several things I don't. Let's talk about AW2 from Remedy Games. So unlike my typical game reviews, I'm going to structure this bad boy a little bit different. It's going to be a different format, and not just because my hair's not done and I'm squeezing on a stress ball that's a blue rubber whale. This is actually because the game gets me a little bit steamed up and I'm going to get spicy talking about it, and I don't want to sound like I'm just ranting and raving about the game because it didn't completely offend me. I think the story landed more so than it didn't, although it did have some confusing moments. Rather than structuring this video component by component, so focusing on the audio design, graphics, gameplay mechanics, this is pretty much going to be front-loaded with the pros, the few things I did like about AW2, and then the rump or ass end of the video is going to be the cons, shortcomings, or limitations, which is a little bit longer than the pros department in my opinion. Starting with the pros, the professionals, what this game does correctly, what I think Remedy Software really knocked out of the park here is going to be the storytelling, as it is broken into two pretty distinct parts. You have Saga's story, which is usually going to be in the woods and the forest, and then you've got good old-fashioned Alan Wake, who's going to be in the inner city, so you got the neon lights on the wet pavement, and it's two very clashing environments. And this wasn't even a complaint that I have written down, but now that I'm saying it out loud, I also want to mention this. Certain games do this. For example, The Last of Us 2, you don't even actually play as Joel. You're going to play as the person that kills him. Spoiler alert. I mean, the game's been out for years, so, you know, you've probably been spoiled. But a lot of faithful fans of the original are coming here to play as, well, the original character that they fell in love with, or enjoyed at least, which is Alan Wake, who I think is a character written very well. And you're not going to play him for the first couple hours. You're going to be playing as Saga Anderson, who is a good character in my opinion, but just something worth mentioning, the games like Last of Us 2, if you came for the main character of the first game, which arguably Ellie's the main character of that game, but you know, Joel, he's gonna get 4-ironed on the fairway pretty quickly. Also, your introduction to Alan Wake in AW2, he's a whining, sniveling, I get that he's been trapped in the upside down in the darkness of Lake Cauldron, so he's going to be losing his mind and really not all there. He doesn't sound like that talented writer who's constantly fighting his personal demons.
In the dark, I'd written for days, a week, almost a complete manuscript of a novel entitled Departure.
But really, your first introduction, the first cutscene with Alan Wake, he's just like, his voice isn't even the same. He's just like, oh my god, what am I gonna do? Why am I here?
It's my fault.
I'm gonna need you to take a breath.
Dark presence.
Easy now. What's your name?
My name It's Alan Wake.
So that was kind of interesting to see Alan Wake introduce this, oh god, my name's Alan, I've been stuck in the lake, help me, saga. I'm really trying to start with the pros, the things I like here, so let's really do that here. First of all, the Mind Lab is a really cool concept. It's unlike anything I've seen. It's a cool way to organize the puzzles, the case pieces, although it's not as explained or dummy proof as I would have liked it. So I did spend about 20-30 minutes at first trying to figure out exactly where to place everything, although once you get it down, it's actually really foolproof and almost oversimplified to where it kind of guides you to put pictures exactly where they need to be on the case board. But overall, a cool concept, and I like that part, being able to escape to this mine place, although it does not pause the game, so you still can get attacked or even killed while you're deep in your mind. The next thing is the story. Overall, I think hits pretty good. It does have some confusing moments, but I like the way it clashes between Saga's part, where she's in the woods, and then Alan Wake is mostly inner city, which is cool. You get two different environments. You get the urban area, inner city, industrial stuff, concrete and lights and whatnot. Then you're going to get the wind rustling through the trees as Saga. I'm going to say right off Jump Street, I did like the Alan Wake parts more, although you don't take the reins of him for a couple of hours. And the first part of Alan isn't the most sensual, as it is kind of just an open puzzle. But if you just stick with it, the Alan Wake parts eventually will get more fun. All right, 6. So I've got the pros out of the way. Oh, I've got one more piece of praise here. The graphics, when they do look good, and there's not a terrible reflection glitch, which in a game that's all about lighting, and it looks weird 60% of the time. The 40% that it doesn't, it looks amazing. And I will say, certain cinematic pieces, the moonlight coming through the trees, or the first scene with Alan Wake where you see all those neon lights on the wet asphalt of the city, looks really sick. So just starting with the graphics, some of the things that I didn't like is, again, this is a game all about lighting. Your flashlight is cascading light in front of you, and there's going to be a lot of texture pop in, although I did notice with an update, a lot of that did go away. But the first few days, I was getting a lot of weird texture pop in on things like foliage. Really did take you out of the immersion, but not nearly as much of this crazy reflection glitch that was on pretty much everything. What it does is basically makes everything look like it's coated in foil or reflected in some kind of holographic tape, and it's straight up a visual glitch that looks horrible, especially in a game that's all about lighting. I just expected more, especially from Remedy Games, who made Control, which was basically the ray tracing benchmark before Cyberpunk 77. And this reflection is always present, especially on things like water, which you're going to see a lot during Saga sections because you're in the woods, and sometimes the game looks beautiful. However, in the city, a lot of the textures look kind of jagged and weird when you just stare at things like a mailbox or a manhole grate. You're going to want to plummet yourself down that manhole grate to get away from what you're staring at. There is 2 graphical modes. I will say fidelity looked only slightly better to the corneas, and it is much noticeable being at 30 frames per second versus 60 frames per second. And after giving fidelity a little taste, I immediately chomped back down on the high resolution mode. 60 frames, please. None of that chop and stutter. There's weird dialogue with a lot of the NPCs when you're just talking to the random nobody NPCs in town. The conversations just end abruptly. Like, imagine having a conversation with me, and instead of saying goodbye or I'll see you tomorrow or something, I just get up and walk away. Kind of weird. But it's not just that. The actual words spoken are kind of dumb. So it's like having a stupid conversation with somebody and then it just ends abruptly. And that happens with damn near all the NPCs. It's been a weird year for NPCs. We got Starfield with the old bug-eyed Johns, and then we got over here in AW2, the NPCs just straight up stop talking to you out of nowhere.
Terrifying. That's all.
No social cues in 2023, I guess. The next gripe I have is this game does not tell you where to go very often, and I understand this game doesn't have to be dummy-proof or hold my hand and walk me through it. However, you are walking through the goddamn woods, and yes, you do have a map, which does help you out significantly. However, when you're just trying to get to your primary objective to continue on the story, it doesn't really guide you or tell you where to go next. And this gets multiplied to an insane degree when it introduces Alan's mechanic, where he can dynamically change the environment by writing different pages of the novel. I got stuck on one little train section and had to look up a YouTube video, which even watching the YouTube videos, the first 3 guides that I watched, the person that was doing the guide, or persons I should say, because they were 3 separate guides, they were all as equally lost and confused as I was. So they were backtracking and trying to figure it out themselves. So if you're going to upload a guide, a walkthrough, just make sure you know what you're doing as well.
Don't you wish everyone had some goddamn integrity?
Having said that, Alan does have this really sick mechanic where he can rewrite reality, basically, but that will make puzzles very confusing because there's going to be 3 or 4 different areas in a sandbox where you can manipulate the environment, and you need to do them in a certain succession or order that's not really explained. Yeah, it's a puzzle, and you're going to be a little bit puzzled trying to figure it out. The next grippity gripe I had, which started probably within the first 10 minutes and then just kind of built within me, and then ended up getting written down on my phone to be explained to all of you, is that this this game has a pretty, quote, slow start, which could be labeled as story building, and I will say it does start out with a very cinematic scene with a fat, bloated, bald, middle-aged dude with high cholesterol stumbling through the woods as his wiener dangles and froze, and yes, you can see that dong a-flowing, but then you realize that you're going to be doing nothing but watching dong swang for about 30 minutes to 2 hours while this game sets up what the shit you're going to be doing. So if you're somebody like me that suffers from a medical condition called Goopy Goblin Gamer Brain, which is a little coin phrase by Nakey Jakey, the man, the myth, the legend that bounces around on that medicine ball.
Goopy Goblin Gamer Brain. Goopy Goblin Gamer Brain basically means that you have little to no patience for anything that isn't fun or engaging second-to-second gameplay. Unskippable cutscenes, long shitty tutorials, limited movement, trailing missions, slow-ass scripted prestige gameplay where you have to suffer through a boring-ass stealth section as a character that isn't Spider-Man. You know, the type of monotonous shit that more and more games have that take away control from the player just to service some mediocre-ass story while you just sit there being like, okay, but can't we get back to the fun part where I blow up cars? That's Goopy Goblin Gamer Brain.
I feel like Alan Wake 1 had a bit of a slow start as well, because you go to the diner, you get your keys from the wrong person, then you go to Cauldron Lake and see the vacation house that's not the Airbnb you booked, but it's actually 5-star, not a 4, so you decide to stay there. Your wife falls off a cliff, breaks her coccyx. You don't really give too much of a shit because she was just yelling at you a second ago, but you're still gonna go after her because you're a good husband when you're not drinking and lost in your last novel. But I was excited playing Alan Wake 1 from the get-go, off Jump Street, and granted, Alan Wake 2 does start somewhat exciting, but the first hour and a half to 2 hours is going to be story building. In fact, I don't even think you pick up a firearm or a 2x4 for about 2 hours. And it's not just the lack of combat, the fact that you get introduced to the mine lab, and then a case, you do some casework for Saga, and then you get introduced to Alan, who sounds like an absolute weasel at first. It didn't hook me and reel me in like I thought it would. In fact, you know, the line broke and I was just floating away. But then there's some downgrades to the actual gameplay, the combat mechanics. For example, the flashlight boost bar is not a smooth transition anymore, but now it has 4 blocks, upgraded later, but it starts as 4 blocks that burn out each time you press the flashlight button. So instead of just being able to linearly hold down the flashlight button and it burns down that bar, and as soon as you let off the button, it starts recharging, it does not work like that. You have to replace the battery to bring back the bars that you burned off, and each time you tap the button, it burns off a bar. So you don't have fine control of your battery life anymore. Speaking of battery life, it's now more scarce because your flashlight does not recover in light checkpoints or automatically over time. You have to replace batteries. Sprint speed is also about 30% slower than I'd like, although Saga and Alan don't pant like a dog like Alan did from the first game. So I will say movement is very limited, as you can't mantle or climb over things that you would think would be climbable, such as a knee-high log. Saga would get tripped up on twigs, and Alan would simply not be able to step up over a curb at some point. So straight up invisible walls aplenty. And the things that you can climb, movement is not even a second, third, or it's not even an afterthought in this game. It's just like, it's a survival horror. That's really all that needs said there. It handles like an on-rails survival horror, which is not a good thing, IMO, or in my personal opinion, because those games already exist. That's a well fleshed out genre. And if I want to play a survival horror, I'm probably going to play something like Resident Evil. But there's a goddamn bold-faced lie. I'm a bigger fan of the Dead Space series than pretty much any survival horror game. Resident Evil has a lot of stinkers in there. Silent Hill was kind of good on the PS1 and 2. Yeah, Dead Space. One of my biggest complaints with this game that is present throughout the entire game, starts about, I don't know, 20 minutes into your playthrough and just doesn't let up until the credits roll, is the jump scares aplenty that pop up like real images on the screen. So not animated images, but actual like pictures of what looks like dead bodies and stuff. I don't like jump scares that are an overlay on the screen, but not in-game. For example, Cortana malfunctioning in the helmet of Master Chief in Halo 5. So it's an overlay that pops up over the gameplay screen. So the jump scares aren't an enemy popping out from behind a tree or the lights flashing on. It's something that isn't even actually in your reality on the screen. It just pops up like an overlay, which might look cool once or twice, but then you're going to realize that these happen frequently. And while they might be scary because they're, I don't know, 30 to 60% louder than the rest of the game sound, they don't really add anything to the game and were somewhat of a nuisance. I've never liked these kind of overlaid pop-up jump scares, and I don't like them now.
Please. The screen will flash horrifying images of Wake, played in live action by the Finnish actor.
Now, if this is even possible, I think enemies are more spongy and tanky than the first game, while ammo and light is even more scarce, meaning you're going to be doing a lot of running around, shucking and jiving, just trying to break ankles, juke, and get to the next light checkpoint. Well, this isn't a huge deal because in the first game, you did a lot of that when you were low on ammunition or batteries, or you just realized that you could see the next checkpoint, the next light source. You could just run around a group of enemies, a horde if you will, and avoid the fight. However, in this game, it's not so much an option as much as you're just going to be doing that because you don't have the equipment for a fight. Also, whenever your health is damaged, and I do mean damaged, you're on your last leg, it is impossible to see what the hell is going on because the screen goes into a low visibility mode with a bunch of effects on screen. Worst of all, this happens early game when you're in the middle of a fight or an enemy encounter that's just naturally scary. So you're fighting with these pop-up jump scare overlays in addition to this red screen of death when you're low on health. Plus, it's a third-person shooter, so you're already kind of battling with the camera in the woods because it's getting trapped up in trees and stuff. Enough said there. Also, we have a surprise award. I just want to slide in here because I rarely give awards to characters in games, and I do think Saga does deserve this award for the slowest shotgun reload I've ever seen.
Station has been seized. Restless breeze.
Good job, sister. Slow and steady wins that race. Get the shells in that tube, in that chamber, carefully. Although, one cool thing I did notice with the shotgun is when I reloaded and I had fired the shotgun about a minute or two ago, there was still smoke steaming up out of those empty shells. And when I cracked that barrel in half, break action to get those 2 shells in there, a little bit of steam came out of there. I thought that was kind of cool and immersive. See, I'm giving this game praise where it deserves it. You know, cool reload animations, okay? You know what's not cool is the live motion TV show, which is kind of just awkward and cringe. And the most detrimental part of this is that the lip syncing is off by about a half second or so. So the whole time I've tried to watch this live motion cutscene, which they obviously spent a lot of time and probably budget on, you can definitely tell the audio was recorded separately in the studio versus live with the video with a boom mic.
Like you've been cooped up in the writer's room for a few too many years.
This is exactly how I feel.
Your new book, Initiation, hits the shelves tomorrow.
What?
So at the end of the day, would I recommend Alan Wake 2? Well, awkwardly enough, if you were a fan of the original, this is kind of a hard sell for you. I was a big fan of the original, and the fact is this is a different genre of game. We went from action adventure, which I think was a little bit more snappy. Alan was kind of lighter on his feet. Granted, this is a game from 2010 from the Xbox 360. Now we're over here in 2023. You almost expect games to be a little bit more fluid with the movement, and for lack of a better word, just have better gameplay, a more enjoyable gameplay loop, and that certainly wasn't the case for me personally. I do think the story is there. I think it was delivered as a psychological thriller that'll really make you think and pour a drink, but fuck, the gameplay, which is the most important part of a video game in my personal opinion, isn't fun. I did not have a good time playing Alan Wake 2, which is so unfortunate because I was craving this game all year, and I tasted it, I wet my beak with it, and then I just kind of like just kind of spit it out on my desk and didn't really enjoy it. I'm sorry to say that, Remedy, because you deliver some straight bangers out of your studio usually. I loved Control. I loved Quantum Break. That's one that doesn't get talked about nearly as much as it should. I love the entire Max Payne series, and I like the first Alan Wake. And then Alan Wake 2 here, if I had to slap a number on it, I'd give it a 5 out of 10. It's a mid-game, a mid-rate game, IMO, or in my personal opinion. Great psychological thriller, clunky gameplay, and a game that's all about lighting, having this weird reflection kick back at you where everything looks like it's coated in foil. That's a big problem for me. Real quick before I sign off, I know I've been bashing this game up and down the block, but it has a really cool musical number, and you're probably thinking to yourself, Kevin, a musical? What's going on here? It is actually the most enjoyable part of the game because you're taking on waves of enemies, and there's also the cool lighting of the stage. It was very reminiscent to that outdoor concert, which was my favorite section of the first game, so I guess it's not that surprising that the musical bit or number is my favorite part of the second game. But I just want to slide this in there at the end that I really do like that little musical number, which is about 3 to 4 hours in, but once you get there, you're gonna have a good time. Not with the rest of the game, but with the musical part, you probably will. Drop in the comment section below your opinion of Alan Wake 1 and 2 and all Remedy Games titles, and I'll see you Stallions and Stallionettes tomorrow. Peace. If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers. This information will reach and assist them as well, which in turn helps me grow this little channel, which I do greatly appreciate. Subscribe for more content like this. I cover news in the gaming community and industry, tutorials helping you get set up streaming and YouTubing, as well as honest gaming product reviews, keyboards, mice, headsets, controllers, mics, chairs, etc. There are some hefty exclusive discount codes found only in the description of my videos and only for the audience here at GamerHeaven. I have links to all my other platforms and socials in the description below. To get in touch with myself and the Stallions and Stallionettes of GamerHeaven, join the community Discord, and check me out at twitch.tv where I go live every other leap year on a blue moon if it falls into an odd calendar number, and my pH balance is on point. Just kidding, starting June I'm going to be live streaming a lot. Thanks for watching. This has been AK40 Kevin hosting GamerHeaven, and I'll see you tomorrow because I upload daily, all the time, 60% of the time, sometimes, most of the time. Peace.